So my son was bitten by a cottonhead. No, that's not right. Copperhead. I'm tired. A copperhead snake this weekend, and that's a very bad snake to be bitten by, and it's also excruciatingly painful. So we finally got to the point where he's doing okay, and I feel like good to go to bed. And my brain was like, "Hey, you know what? Abuse is like an iceberg." And I went, "Oh, brain, let's sleep. Let's sleep right now." And it was like, "Let's talk about it." It's actually a really good idea. So you've seen the meme or the photos where it shows like an iceberg, and there's the bit at the top above the water, and you're like, there's the iceberg, but really there's this whole rest of the iceberg underneath the water. And then of course it's in the ocean it's in. Um, and so the top that's above, those are the abusive actions that an abuser does. Those are the things that you can look at, point at off a checklist and go, yes, that's abuse. But the underneath part of the iceberg, those are the things that lead to those behaviors. The beliefs, the ideas, the biology, the world perspective, you know, those all lead to those actions. Without this part, you don't get to, the abuse is the result, not the cause, is what I'm saying. Basically, the abuse is an indicator that somebody is misthinking, misbelieving, has an orientation toward other people that is fundamentally dysfunctional and compromised. And then there's the water. There's the water that the iceberg floats in. And the water I think is also really interesting because you have to be floating in the water of not recognizing somebody's autonomy and freedom over themselves. Now, obviously, like we intersect with each other, you know, in terms of like our actions and choices, you know, and when those choices materially impact somebody else in a bad way, like, you know, we then start to be able to say, hey, no, that's not okay. You can't treat me that way. But like in general, we get to decide things for ourselves. And somebody who doesn't respect that for somebody else, the water their iceberg is in is dangerous water. As soon as you start to believe that people shouldn't have autonomy for whatever reason it is, then you get to the iceberg underneath part where we start to have ideas, beliefs that lead us to give ourselves permission to power over another person using all the things you see in the top part of the iceberg. So it's financial abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse. There's like a couple more. But anyway, so when you look at the list, like a checklist, you know, oh, this person has physically assaulted me. Check, that's abuse. This person is controlling my phone and who I can and cannot talk to. Checklist. This person is raping me. Checklist. Engaging in reproductive coercion. Checklist. Like we go down a checklist, and that's that visible part of the iceberg. Their abuse, their actions you can point to. That's the visible part of the iceberg. So I kind of wanted to go over the underwater part of the iceberg. And I've been working on this list for years. When did I start it? It was like 5 years ago. No, longer than that. Anyway, I started it with 4 basic ideas, and I think it was 4. So I started it with like essentially 4 basic ideas. There were things that I noticed with abusers where I was like, this thinking pattern goes across like almost all abuse types from what I was seeing. And it's now expanded into 8, but it's basically the 8 signs and patterns of abusive thinking. And so this is that underwater part of the iceberg. This is how somebody thinks that then leads them to take the actions. That's the visible abuse. One, their feelings, needs, wants always take priority. Two, they feel that being right is more important than anything else. So that's that primacy of rightness I've mentioned in other videos, versus like a primacy of autonomy, primacy of kindness, primacy of relationship. Three, they justify their problematic, abusive actions because they're right. Four, image management. They're controlling the narrative and how others see them because of how they acted in being right, which is like the abuse. So they're trying to prevent themselves from experiencing the consequences of their actions. Five, trying to control and change your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions. Six, they have an antagonistic relational paradigm. So it's them versus you versus them versus others, others versus them. And they might have this thinking style or belief, and you have no idea about it until they get mad. And then they'll say something like, well, you always blah, 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 or everybody's always against us. Stuff like that. Seven, an inability to see anything from someone else's perspective. They don't have to agree, but they should be able to understand another person's perspective. Because if they can't do this, this means they don't have a model of other people as fully realized human beings. And then eight, they believe they have the right to punish you or others, and they're punitive oriented. And this is versus being growth oriented, problem solving oriented, boundaries oriented, or safety oriented. And then I put a little note at the bottom that says these are all the ingredients for abuse to occur. So like another model of abuse is, the abuse is the food that's been made, from the recipe, the ingredients of the thought processes and beliefs. It's sometimes biology. But anyway, so when you have somebody who is doing certain things that they ping wait a minute. It doesn't seem like a big enough deal to break up with somebody over, to like cut your parents off over, to end a friendship over. But at the same time, it might give you pause. And the reason why is because it's indicative of one or more of those ways of thinking. And it might be indicative also that they don't respect you. They might have contempt for you. They might be swimming in that water that doesn't believe that you have autonomy over yourself as a human being, even if you're wrong. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.